It's very interesting that you said that because not only is it relevance, it's credibility.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved to my last role as the chief medical officer of pediatric health system, I went through the negotiations and I was so excited about the job. And I hung up the phone and I realized I didn't pin down my clinical opportunities.
Ew.
So I called immediately and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I neglected in my excitement to define how much clinical work I can do." And they said, "None.
None.
This is
That's what I
100%
thought.
administrative." And I said, "I'm really disappointed, but I cannot accept this job. I can't move to a new state with new faculty that I didn't even impact their development as residents and have credibility if I'm not doing what they do. Oh, the
Mm-hmm.
EMR is hard. Oh, yeah, it is hard. I don't know. I don't do it. Yeah.
Yep. So it
So
sucks to be you. Yeah. So,
so I hung up the phone and was really disappointed, but thought it was for the better. And I got a phone call about 6 hours later from the CEO saying, I vetted this issue with a lot of my physicians, and they said, yeah, we don't want a suit. We want a doctor.
cool. So welcome
So,
to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with my very special guest, Rob McGregor. And Rob and I met, I think we connected on LinkedIn.
mhm.
And then connected through Resilience Community is another place with Sphere, because Sphere just gathers really cool humans around. And so I appreciate that. So Rob is founder and CEO of an organization called Sage Advisors. And I know you do executive coaching, consulting for others. And then also you're still, which is cool because I interrupted you when you told me this, professor of pediatrics at a university or a college. And I was like, oh my God, that's great. And I didn't hear the rest of it. So you're going to tell people about that college, and you're doing really other cool things in the mental health space around caregivers. I think you're primarily focused on docs around burnout and resilience. And I think it's freaking awesome. So I know you have a quote to kick us off. And so welcome to the conversation, sir.
Right. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. So my quote, it's been attributed to multiple people as I've first discovered it and searched it, but I attribute it to Helen Keller. And it's when one door of happiness closes, another opens. But often we look so long at the closed door that we do not see the one that's been opened for us. And it kind of gives me goosebumps when I hear it, because when I think about it, I discovered it as I was on my coaching journey, and I happened to fall into a niche because I was in the process of actively retiring and was working with a coach who's very gifted in the retirement sector. He's actually a certified financial planner who
Oh, wow.
recognized that docs don't do this very well because they look back and mourn what they have left, as
Mhm.
opposed to looking forward to something they can retire to.
Mhm.
So I have to give credit to Michael Schwartz because he's the one that gave me the concept. Then I found the quote, and now I think he's put it in his book. So so we're
Oh,
all
I
so we're all
love
even,
that.
yeah. So it's a neat network. But I do find it very true. And as I did my really last 90 days on the job, I had moments, and then I recognized, I'm going to use this in a deliberate manner and get adequate closure and build something new and preserve something that you may referenced, and that's the mental health services that we provided
Mhm.
for all members of the medical staffs of two of the hospitals in our area. And
Yeah.
I I'm a professor at NEOMED, Northeast Ohio Medical University, and that's a larger university, but it's the College of Medicine within that university.
So thank you for that. It was interesting that you're talking, because what came to mind for me, and I think it's anyone transitioning through, and depending on how much, being a doc, provider, physician is identity.
Mhm.
And I think that's what a lot of people may struggle with, is when you've got this very strong career choice that is who you are, right? And then we go to transition into something else. We're leaving that behind. And so I know a lot of images with transformation and evolution. People take the caterpillar that was in the cocoon, that the butterfly, and literally they left all the everything behind. However, you can't have the butterfly without the caterpillar.
Mhm.
And so I think it's that same type of thing, to be able to step into what your new is. It's not that you disregard or leave it behind, but you're no longer saying, I'm a practicing physician.
Correct. I had to admit, though, I had it a little easier than others because I was a practicing physician on the front lines in the primary care practice. Then I joined a teaching university where I got involved with resident education, and I became really involved as the residency director and training others. So I kind of had this chip click relatively early in my career. I'd say probably 20 years ago. And I
Mhm.
practiced for 40 years until the end of 2024. But I had this chip that I love my one-on-ones with the families in front of me and the children's and adolescents. But how cool is it to be able to train 25 people every year who want to do that journey and indirectly get to touch their patients? And then I got hooked into further administrative duties. Don't go let any good deed go unpunished, and I became more of an administrative position. However, I had to give up my primary care practice and even my special needs practice. So I became a hospitalist because I could do that episodically, still
Yeah.
teach learners and not forget why I'm doing this administrative work. And so I think I had bridges built in. I wish I could tell you they were deliberate. They weren't, but it was really kind of following my heart. And
Yes.
and now the wellness initiative that you made reference to that gives free concierge service to all medical providers of two hospitals for now, although we're transitioning into something that opens it up for others in the immediate area, gives me a way to still keep. I'm not a mental health provider, but I can coach on the side and I can administer this phenomenal service that really helps docs overcome the barrier of and stigma of mental health. So
Hmm.
I think I kind of cheated. I mean, I didn't really slam a door. It's like, oh, I see these other doors, but when I read that quote and I meet with people who are contemplating retiring, they often say, I can't. I have no. I That's me. That's all I do. That's my feel.
That's their identity.
And then we need to work on, you know, what's your legacy going to be? In addition, you were a retired doc, and now what?
Hmm.
So I obviously get excited when I talk about it,
Yeah.
but I feel like I'm feeding forward. I'm still not the guy, although I do have young grandchildren, so I do still play doctor, but that's a different story.
They're going to call you when they need something. It's so funny. I've got a friend of mine, a business partner, who's for the most part retired veterinarian. I mean, he sold his practice, large animal. He still does things. He's up in Canada, but he also will self-diagnose and do himself. He's a vet. He goes, I'm a living being. I still know this
I'm a
stuff.
big animal.
Yeah. So it's so funny how we don't let go. But I think part of it too, though, Rob, when you were talking, is a lot of times and you commented bridging it. I didn't do it intentionally. But what happens is not every providers sometimes have to make a choice or feel like they have to make a choice between frontline patient care and administrative duties. So, but however, that being said, I know a number of physician leaders that were CEOs of an acute care hospital and did shifts in the ED, okay, because they were an ED doc. To your point, hospitalists, you could do patient rounds, you could provide care to the patients that have been admitted in hospital. For those who don't know the hospitalist role, you're no longer, primary care in the outside world, but you're still serving patients. And so there's the serving part for you to go, you know what, this is part of my identity and I'm still face to face. And I'm relevant when I'm making administrative decisions because I understand what's going on in the front line today. Because things change.
It's very interesting that you said that, because not only is it relevance, it's credibility.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved to my last role as the chief medical officer of pediatric health system, I went through the negotiations and I was so excited about the job. And I hung up the phone and I realized I didn't pin down my clinical opportunities.
Ew.
So I called immediately and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I neglected in my excitement to define how much clinical work I can do." And they said, "None.
None.
This is
That's what I
100%
thought.
administrative." And I said, "I'm really disappointed, but I cannot accept this job. I can't move to a new state with new faculty that I didn't even impact their development as residents and have credibility if I'm not doing what they do. Oh, the
Mm-hmm.
EMR is hard. Oh, yeah, it is hard. I don't know. I don't do it. Yeah.
Yep. So it
So
sucks to be you. Yeah. So,
so I hung up the phone and was really disappointed, but thought it was for the better. And I got a phone call about 6 hours later from the CEO saying, I vetted this issue with a lot of my physicians, and they said, yeah, we don't want a suit. We want a doctor.
mm-hmm.
So it was critical, and I learned so much by doing the gemba walk.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to get a consult at 4 o'clock on Friday, and the other hospitalists got mad. They said, "How do you get it done?" I said, "Well, I think you'll get it done now too, because the secret's out."
You do. It's interesting. You use the term Gemba. People who don't know process improvement or lean methodologies, Gemba is where the work happens. You're going to the front line. Some people call it where value's created, where we're engaging with frontline staff. It's an interesting thing. What I appreciate was your intentionality around that. And I think a lot of us, I'm not saying all, a lot of us have been in situations to where we had to look at that situation and go, you know what, that's a deal breaker. And that had to have been tough for you to go, you know what, that's not my open door.
Right.
If this isn't part of it, it's not my open door. And yet for them to come back and go, no, Rob, this really is your open door. This is the one. This is the one. So you're in a teaching hospital. I would love the mental health stuff. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about, because you and I did when we first chatted about
Mm-hmm.
where it came about, why it started, the whole mental health thing, and the population that you intended and set up to initially support, why that was a thing.
So I was the chief medical officer, and I was the first chief medical officer. So anything that the other administrators felt uncomfortable with became part of my duties. So,
Okay.
so because I had been a residency director for years and run med ed programs in other teaching hospitals, they said, "Oh, you do med ed." And that was fine, because that was the one spot I knew what I was doing. The rest of it
Yeah.
was a little
You're like, yeah, I'm there.
freelancing.
Count me in.
So the residency directors reported to me, and within their departments in the chairs, and they brought an issue to me that the governing body, the ACGME, is the alphabet soup that oversees medical education in the
Healthcare has a
U.S.
lot of acronyms, by the
Oh,
way. So, but go ahead.
absolutely. So the ACGME has said you really need to provide access to mental health services for all trainees. So if you're going to have residents, you need to have this access.
Oh, wow.
So the residency director at my organization was friends with the one at the adult hospital that I ended up partnering with, ironically. And the two of them came to me and said, "Rob, you've been in this before. Will you help us set up a service that will at least give opt-out counseling so people can meet a counselor when they're not in crisis? And then
Mm,
hopefully that'll make it easier for them to get help."
yeah.
So I thought about it and I said, I love the idea, and I'm more than happy to be right on board. However, we need to expand it.
Mm.
If I'm going to do this for the residents and the attendings that are left holding their patient when 80 hours clicks and they walk out, that's just not right.
Mm-mm.
I had also recognized that, in the Midwest, it was wonderful. People are very, very nice, and sometimes so nice that that they're not always kind. And I recognized that I had a really magnanimous long-term CEO who everybody adored, and he was sure that the whole burnout epidemic, we were immune because we were in middle America and the docs are so aligned and they love us. And I said, well, that's great. I would love to prove that, because if that's really true, we can market the heck out of it and we can hire everybody we need to. And he
Yeah.
said, great. So the AMA had a version of the burnout survey that was free, and I got
Yeah.
permission to administer it. And before we got the final results back, I was notified that we had a 60%
Oh,
participation rate.
wow. That's impressive. I mean, that's impressive.
It's impressive. And my CEO said, see, Rob? And I said, well, we don't have the results yet. And
Mm-mm.
I could tell every doc in the hospital, I have $100 for you if you come to my office between 4 and 5. And I'd probably still have several $100 left, because they only act when it makes a difference or they're hurting.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope you're right, but brace yourself. And sure enough, the data came back that we were not immune.
Mm-mm.
48% were really at high risk or burned out.
Wow.
And it was really a national average. And my board said to me, well, when are you going to survey them again? And I said, when we do something so we can expect a different answer.
Yeah.
And I was, in the back of my mind was this ask from MedEd. Now I had the board challenging me. And in that moment, I combined the two and I said, so I'm going to come up with a model that gives free concierge service to any member of our med staff and trainees. If you can give me a cash outlay to start and give us a little bit of a runway. And they
Mm-hmm.
said, go ahead and do it. So that was the birth of this concept. And I cold called, I love this guy now. Joe Varley is the chair of psychiatry at the adult hospital, the only independent adult hospital in our area, because we have so many conglomerations.
Yes.
And Joe, you don't know me, but I know your wife because she was on our women's board. So I said, Barb can give me credibility, but I have a BHAG, a big hairy audacious goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to help me design a program where you can give barrier-free mental health services to all my docs, all my APPs, my nurse practitioners,
Oh,
and
yeah.
all my trainees. And it took us a little while for him to get over the shock that was a big ask.
Oh, yeah.
And it was before video was really a big thing, and we had big footprints. And
Because this
but
was before COVID. This was before COVID hit.
it was about
So, yeah.
18 months before COVID. We started the planning. We went live in COVID, March of COVID.
Okay. That's when everything got locked down.
Yep.
That
And
would have
that's
been
when we were live.
March of 2020. March of 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're 4 years old as of this past month, and we've served over 500 clients,
Wow.
including 220 some that have had continuous care. Um, we're very protective. Anonymity is key. The only data we really have objectively is an entry survey that says who sent them and would they have gotten help if this didn't exist. And who sent them has changed dramatically in the 4 years. It's now a peer. It's no longer a
I love
supervisor.
that.
It's no longer they saw an advertisement in the elevator. So that changed. But the thing that hasn't changed is if this service didn't exist, I wouldn't have gotten help. And
Wow.
that's pretty. That's a creates a burning platform to me as I move to my next stage. Is that if they're not going to get it, we don't know outcomes of specific patients, but I know for a fact that I've had 2 suicides averted, because we're not a crisis hotline, but I know we had to escalate into an adult inpatient psych unit for 2 providers, and they're both back in practice. And it was
Wow.
just an amazing story. So when people give me grief about the fact the model's not sustainable, it's too expensive, I asked them to quantify if they were losing one of their docs to suicide, what would that be worth? Not about replacing them, but about the impact that has on your
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah.
So I feel really good about the mission. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we'll be able to sustain it as an independent 501c3 now, because we'll have to have some revenue streams. But we're orchestrating some things, and I think the whole fact that med ed needs it, that's going to create a little bit of a commodity that we may be able to sell that to other hospitals in our area. But
Yes.
our goal is to open it up to any physicians and existing APPs that are in the service, any physicians, and in the immediate area of Akron, Ohio.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'll clarify something because I'm doing the math in my head. So you would have launched in March of 2021.
Right.
If this was your 4 years, only because I'm analytical person and I'm like,
Well,
the
you're the
numbers aren't
numbers
right.
person. Yep.
I threw
Yep.
out 2020. Um, the thing that stands out for me, Rob, that you were talking about is where it started and what's going on. So when you talk about residents, I'm going to put myself in the shoes, even though I've never gone medical school, residency, anything like that. But if you can imagine the transition in your life from student, right, responsible for self, you're learning about the human body and care and all medical stuff, to you're actually on the front lines making decisions about treatment and whether or not humans live or die. It is, I can't even wrap my brain around what that puts someone through. There was one doc, I was recently at LEI, so Lean Enterprise Institute. There was a summit. I did a pre-summit workshop there. One of the evening things, I was with the physician leader and we were chatting. Very happy-go-lucky guy. He was in pediatrics, and I think it was Stanford. Anyway, I was chatting with him just about his story and what's going on, because I'm always looking for, what people's story is and how other people can benefit from hearing that story, right? Through podcasts, whatever it is. And so I asked him, I said, what's your story? Why leadership? Why are you here right now, right? You're at the Lean Enterprise Institute Summit. You're a physician leader and you're doing process improvement, which, oh, by the way, is just another layer of a job that people didn't sign up for. And he told me the story when he was in residency. He reported to Jack somebody, I can't remember the last name. Anyway, another physician leader, he reported to him. And this particular doc had missed signs of sepsis and some other stuff, this young resident. And the patient ended up dying. So the system was broken. It didn't, lend itself to that at the time. And this guy now is probably early 40s. And he said, I went to him and said, I'm not cut out for this. Clearly, I'm not cut out for this. And so he's not alone in that when people feel that way and you miss signs, because I look around, I've been in healthcare, supporting people in healthcare since 1998. And I look around and go, you've got amazing people at the front lines that we're freaking lucky that more people aren't dying with the system, because there's so much brokenness in it, right? So much complexity, so much, all the handoffs, all everything. And he said, if it wasn't for him, the doc that he reported to, basically talking him down from this to say, hey, this happens. This was nothing, that you could have done human wise to solve for this. This is just part of the stuff that gets dropped. He would have quit. He said, but what it did for him when he got to a position to where he could make a difference, he signed up. He's like, we've got to fix this. And so when I hear stuff like that and I hear what you are doing and tasked with doing, that those are critical transition points in people's lives, that it's important to manage the stress. Because where I joke around in finance, because I was finance director at a hospital, I would tell my team, because they would, stress themselves out. I said, this isn't going to matter 5 years from now. And even though we are in healthcare, we're not saving lives in our role. I couldn't say those words if I happened to be in your role with people reporting to me who were providing care to the front line.
Right.
And so I think this is vitally important for people to be able to have some outlet, some resource for them to tap in and go, you know what, you're not God. And as humans, stuff falls through, and it's, the onus is on the organization, the people in the organization, to improve processes so these well-intentioned humans that are caring for other humans don't have stuff slip through the cracks. So there's my soapbox. What's on your
I
brain?
love it. I love it. That's, quality improvement also reported to my role when I was
Mm-hmm.
new. I then got that elevated to its own C title because it really needs someone to be able to think about it 100% all the time,
Mm-hmm.
because to your point, our systems are inefficient
Mm-hmm.
and broken, and we need to be able to orchestrate that doing the right thing is the easiest thing to do, that they
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't have to be winging it, and that we do things the same way for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And we want, if we're going to fail, we want to fail fast, but not at a critical juncture that's a life and death
Mm-hmm.
juncture. So you mentioned your pediatric friend was kind of happy-go-lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Pediatricians as a group, I could always pick them out in medical school classes. I could pick them out in my colleagues when I was early in my training. Uh, there is a happy-go-lucky piece, and I think a piece of that is kids are resilient, and
Mm-hmm.
there are some bad outcomes, absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
but most of the time they have a healthy enough system that even when things are getting bad, they hang on, and someone wiser or more vigilant or experienced, the nurse says, Rob, you're missing this, and you
Mm-hmm.
rethink it, or the parent says, Rob, this isn't my kid. And I said, well, what am I missing? And then you catch it. So I do think most of pediatrics is joyful.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just put in that plug, because pediatrics is not a highly subscribed specialty anymore. And it's going
Mm.
to be a challenge because of the pay difference.
Oh,
So
that's true. That's true.
so
Yeah.
even if I'm a peds GI doc and I get the same training after being a pediatrician to use the scopes and do those things, there's easily hundreds of thousands of dollars difference in
Mm-hmm.
pays for the adult GI versus the peds GI. So that's just
Mm-hmm.
one example, but that's a different soapbox that
Yeah.
we weren't going to talk about today. But I will put in a plug that I think pediatrics is still, I would do that. I would do it the same way. I would.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thing, the choices that we make, and you're right. And so, yeah, and it's so funny when you're saying that, because you have a joy about you as well. And that, and I never really thought about and associated. So then you go pediatrics, and it's so funny, the different groups. Surgeons are a different group in among themselves, right? And so I think and when I think about it, there's this different degrees of severity in things. So you talk about life and death, that you have it right in front of you. Surgeons are like in moments, a very truncated period of time, someone can go sideways, and they can not make it because of anesthesia. They cannot make it, any number of things that can go on. I supported surgical services and process improvement when I was at Sutter for about a year and a half, 2 years. And it is this, I don't think people realize or think about it, because elective surgeries are so commonplace. Every single surgery, you have the risk of death, every single one. And people don't realize that. And so you've got the people that are in charge of all that stuff. And that, you talk about choreography and, you know, with circulators and scrub techs and, you know, the docs and the, you know, total knee. I mean, total knees are like, when I first looked into the OR room when they were getting ready, I'm like, did we just land on the moon? I mean, they've got these helmets, this whole gear, so it's sterile environment. So I'm on the outside looking in, and I looked in one, robotics is another thing, right? I looked in one OR room and I'm like, is this a storage closet? I mean, we had everything, like every instrument, everything you can imagine. No, those are all the things we need for a robotic surgery, right? I'm like, what is happening? So it's an interesting thing when we're no longer on the outside looking in, we're actually in looking in. And to peel that curtain back and realize that this is a population of people that have chosen this profession, that, yeah, it can be, you know, you can highlight things and it can be like, oh my gosh, that's a surgeon or a doctor or whatever. It's freaking hard work. It's freaking hard work because you do have people's lives, and the decisions you make are life-saving. And so when I think about that and think about the mental health aspect of it, and I know you have certain, you know, evidence that certain things are working, I have to wonder, Rob, is there an opportunity, and maybe you've thought about it, where you do this entry-level survey? Can you do a survey after the fact and go, hey, this is what you were when you came in. Where are you now, anonymously? So that it can be advertised more broadly. Because to your point, people are referring other people, which tells me it's working, right? I'm not going to refer you a busy provider if I didn't get value out of it. No, by the way, when I refer you, I'm admitting that I went through this. But I'm wondering more broadly, is there an opportunity? Because when I think about the funding that's needed, right? And so now you've got my finance brain going.
Good. I can use that help.
What's the ROI to where it can be more broadly and it's no longer anecdotal, because at some level it is anecdotal, right? People need evidence so that, to your point, it can be one life, but they're making decisions about all of it. You know, how do we bring it up to where this is what that really meant? So instead of, I wouldn't have gotten the help if I didn't know about this, right? Or if this didn't exist, to, I'm no longer in this place because of what I went through. And so, and oh, by the way, I had a panel of whatever patients, or I could see how many patients a day, and now I can do X, or I'm no longer looking at quitting the profession, because that's a reality. If I'm not deciding to quit life, maybe I'm deciding to walk away from this. And so now our shortage of physicians, it gets even bigger.
So I think you've hit on a really important point. And Dr. Barley, the psychiatrist that partnered with me in this, he and I went head to head early on about getting data. And, you know, I'm a little nerdier. I've been an administrative part of the suite longer than Joe. And he was adamant. And I said, can't we give them a unique identifier? And, you know, one of the challenges early on is we decided there was no link to the hospital's EMRs. And as a startup, we weren't going to have an EMR.
Right.
And as we now look at this opportunity to become independent and do things a little differently, even if it means that there's some skin in the game for the provider to pay a little bit of something, we are looking to get our own internal EMR system. So the aversion to the EMR isn't that it's an electronic footprint, it's that it's shared and that it's universal and anyone can hack into that. So we're looking at an individual way to do things that would be linked only to billing, and the data, specific data, isn't there. So my point is, moving forward, we could track with unique identifiers and then ask for permission to reach out to them for surveys. So I don't think the informed consent would be a problem. I think we could work around that. But Dr. Varley and I just met this week, and I said, I think it's time for us to re-look at this. So
Mhm.
you've given me more inspiration to get out there and figure out a better way to do it.
I'm here for you. So if you want a soundboard later, I'm here for you. Because I just think that's the missing piece in order to tell a more complete story, because you're tapping from logically, it makes sense that people are tapping in and they're getting help. But some people could also tell the same story as they're not with you anymore, tapping into it, and it didn't work.
Right.
And so it'd be interesting, what is working at what degree and what level, because as much as people may be reluctant to put an ROI on people's lives, because I agree, like the MasterCard commercial, it's priceless. The reality of it is, when we run this thing up the food chain and it's part of the decisions that organizations or individuals are making about money, that's the rest of the story that needs to be part of it, because otherwise it can get left aside because people are going, well, what do we really know?
Right.
So I know what it is to justify that stuff and be at the table and watch stuff that, ends up on the cutting room floor because it didn't make the cut. And it's really cool stuff. So I freaking appreciate this time with you, sir. I would welcome anytime you want to come back, because I'd love an update on what's going on and what's happening. And just to hear more of the story of your life transition and what you went through, because you're definitely looking at all the open doors, and I think it's freaking cool. What one or two things would you love people to walk away with around all the stuff that we chatted with today?
Wow, we covered a lot of ground, and you're very artful at managing these podcasts. So thank you. I think the one piece that we danced around, we didn't dance around it, but we just didn't, it was implied. But when we have providers that are doing really long, arduous work, and they may be getting financially reimbursed well for it, so that's not a reason to feel bad about it. But we have to be mindful of the fact that the ego of docs that get more and more specialized is really such that they demand perfection. And while I want, I know if I got a 97 on a test, I would be upset. Why didn't I know those three things? I know that. And that's how most of us manage to get into medical school. However, it's not sustainable because we're human. Whether we're a neurosurgeon pinpointing a microscopic tumor in a neonate, or whether we are on the front lines seeing 50 patients and making sure we get the one that's really sick to the right space. There is this pressure to be infallible. And I think the piece that's missing in medical education, or it has been, my daughter's a physician as well, so it didn't catch up in her generation, is self-grace and self-care. Because no one can be their best for their patients if they're not their best for themselves. And it sounds corny, but self-care is not selfish. And it's really what we need to do to maintain safety and reliability and success in the medical profession. So the macho, I'm the surgeon and I fix hearts, and I fix God's mistakes. I've heard a surgeon say that one time, which I really was challenged with. But that image, that fierce individualism, it's not, there's not a place for it anymore. So if you're involved with the healthcare system, any of you are listening to this, make sure there is access for you to get care, because most states have changed the regulations so that the state licensure does not ask, have you ever sought help for mental health services? It asks, are you fit to give care? And that was something that Corey Feist, who runs the Lorna Breen Foundation, has been able to mandate through multiple states so far. So if you're out there, make sure that that's not one of the things that keeps your docs in your state from getting care, is that there's overly intrusive questions that don't help anybody.
I didn't even frickin' know that, Rob, that that was the thing. And so if I know I've got to answer this question,
You're going to go on the down
how
low, or you're not going to do it.
how likely am I to go and get care if I think it's going to stop me from doing what I spent all these years of my life to get ready for?
Now, most states have adapted, and I know we don't have time to go to down this rabbit hole, but
Yeah,
sometime I'd like to introduce you to Corey Feist,
yeah,
whose sister-in-law named Lorna Breen was
yeah.
a phenomenal triathlete, could do everything, ER doc in New York City during COVID, got COVID, made herself go back to work before she was ready, and then
Mm.
took her own life.
Oh my God.
So Corey and Lorna's sister have really spearheaded the Lorna Breen Foundation to really push through legislative efforts to remove barriers. So
Yeah,
he's one of my heroes. I
I love
unfortunately had to
it.
speak right behind him one time at a meeting. It was like, oh no, that's not fair. but, but
You bring out the big guns, and then you know, here I am.
yeah,
We all have a story. I think it's awesome because, and then you can make those connections and thread that stuff. Um, I had no idea that that was the case, and I think part of it too is it's important for us to highlight this stuff, that mental health is not a weakness. Mental health is not a defect for some way, right? If we're struggling with it. Health coaching is part of helping people with the mental health piece. You know, I'd have coaches tell me, Michele, this feels like therapy. Well, it's not, but it's about unlocking that stuff so that, to your point, we don't have these ridiculous expectations of ourselves. And I think part of it, Rob, what I heard when you were talking is, and I put myself in the shoes of people, is that of course I'm going to strive for perfection. Of course I am, because of what I do for a living. Who's going to say it's okay not to be perfect when we're talking about saving lives? And so I get the reason that we do it now in a way that I hadn't before. That being said, and of course, we're going to make mistakes because we're human. And so it's this idea of striving for operational excellence, striving for quality, understanding that perfection is not an achievable state as a human, and to give ourselves grace when the expected actually comes to be. So thank you, sir. I appreciate the time. This has been Leadership Soundbites with Rob McGregor and Michele. And until next time, please like, share, subscribe, and have a freaking awesome day.